the Talksport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the Talksport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search Talksport Fan Network.
Welcome back to the show, all Cherries fans, and thank you for joining us for another dose of cherry picking. Now, it wouldn't be cherry picking if I didn't have my main man next to me, Mr. Matthew Harrison. How you doing, Matt?
Yeah, well, good, Craig. Looking forward to the Cup at the weekend, but also very much looking forward to this episode of Cherry Picking.
Definitely, and it is a special one. And I guess the Cup, is it a welcome distraction for us? I guess what we're gonna talk about today, it probably wasn't initially. Keep going in the Premier League was probably, a focus for our football club, but maybe because of the recent happenings in the past couple of days, it could probably be a welcome distraction now, couldn't it?
Yeah, but I'm sure we'll touch on that a bit later on. But
Yeah, definitely. So let me go through what is coming up on cherry picking this week. So, of course, we are going to be starting off with our weekly game, Guess the Cherry. We're going to discuss David Brooks' strike, which was enough to sink the Toffees. We are going to have Paul Belverstone joining us as we talk about our half-term report and look at the AFC Bournemouth season so far. And we'll have a look at this weekend's game and ask Europe or the Cup. So there's plenty to look forward to, as always, in this show. But I tell you what, let's start off with Guess the Cherry. And like I say, answers in the comments. If you haven't guessed, don't look at the comments because you'll just ruin it for yourself. You can send it on a postcard, but it won't get to us.
would you like me to take it away?
Yeah, take it away, Matt. Take it away.
I know you've got a bad voice. Right, so this week's Guess the Cherry. Born in Southampton in 1978. He was signed by Bournemouth for a grand sum of £5,000. Played 282 times for the Cherries, hitting the net 37 times. Scored the playoff winning goal to promote Burnley to the Premier League. Was caretaker manager at Bristol City before becoming the manager at Cheltenham until September 2023. So who is he?
There we go. There we are. So if you know, put it in the comments and let us know. But if you haven't guessed it yet, don't ruin it for yourself. Keep thinking hard, and you might just well get it. You might just as well get it. But I tell you what, let's talk about a recent game, and of course, it is this win against Everton at Dean Court. So, David Brooks, screamer, fired the Cherries into 2025. So, AFC Bournemouth 1, Everton 0. We're going to touch on this in some detail. So, the informed Cherries, who fought back from 2-0 down to win 3-2 in dramatic fashion in the reverse game earlier fixture in the season. Of course, the last game at Goodison Park for the Cherries quickly settled into their rhythm, with Jordan Pickford thwarting Dongo Watara in the 8th minute. Anton Semenyo thought he had put Bournemouth in front when he turned in Ryan Christie's cross soon after, but the winger was denied by the offside flag. Evanilson drilled wide as the host continued to threaten the opener, while Pickford stood tall to keep out Justin Kluivert's dinked effort. With the introductions of Nathan Patterson and teenager Harrison Armstrong, Everton looked more dangerous after the break, though it was Bournemouth who seemed the more likely to break the deadlock, with Semenyo testing Pickford from 20 yards. And the Toffees' resolve was finally broken when Kirko set an inviting cross to the far post and Brooks cushioned a volley home. Abdoulaye Doucouré went close to equalising when he volleyed narrowly wide in the 85th minute, but Everton succumbed to a second straight defeat. What the manager said, Andoni Iraola said, we had to be patient, even if we had been in control of the game and pushing them a lot. We've had chances, but they have very good centre-backs and goalkeeper, and we couldn't make the difference until close to the end. Sean Dyche, a man that I probably sound a bit like at the moment, I'm sure he smokes about 20 fags a night with his martini. Sean Dyche said, a really tight game. First half, we were not at the races, and I made some changes. I thought we had a stronger performance second half and asked some questions. There you are. Actually, do you know what? That was easier for me to do that way, than normal. But I'll tell you what, I'll start off with something which is going to be depressing for the Everton fans. You are, including Southampton, the worst team I have seen down here this season, apart from Jordan Pickford. And do you know what? It's a shame because Everton fans have always been very, very good on this channel. They've been really supportive. Thanks us a lot. I am saying it as it is. At the end of the day, they weren't good. The Everton fans have all been saying that. They want Sean Dyche out. But they frustrated us, didn't they, Matt?
Yeah, it was a frustrating game, and it was one of those games when you're performing well and you're playing well and you're doing well in the league. It's one of those games, and you get those games throughout seasons where you've got to be patient and wait for that goal to come.
Yeah.
And when you get that, you know when that goal comes, either the floodgates are going to open, or you are going to grind the win out. And that's how I was feeling sat there on Saturday. Yeah, I mean, again, and we touch on stuff with Belvers about how the season's been as a whole, but again, just frustrating to see those chances from the likes of Semenyo, just go slightly agonisingly wide. And I think if we'd have scored in the first half, we might have won maybe 2 or 3-0. But yeah, again, Pickford, you can see why he's been England's number one for so long. I would say he was probably their man of the match, really. Travers wasn't overly tested, was he? To be fair. And as you can see from the ownership, we were saying last week, the ownership would probably be mad to change him. But on the news yesterday, it was all about them coming in with the vision to change him straight away. So I don't think he's going to be in the dugout of Goodison for much longer. But yeah, from our perspective, the most important thing is 3 points on the board again. It was, frustrating at times. They did frustrate us. Big disappointment from it, with the injury to Evanilson, which we'll touch on later. But yeah, overall, I totally agree with you. It was frustrating sitting there watching that one, but the most important thing was by 5 o'clock we had the 3 points in the bag. So, and there's going to be more games like that throughout the season. Especially if we continue to do well, there's going to be games where we are going to have to grind out a result and just keep pressing them. Which, yeah. But yeah, that's the most important thing for me. First game of the new year, and 3 points on the board, and we sit in the league at 7th. And you'd be pinching yourself back in August if you said, come January, you'd be sat 7th. And like over Christmas between 5th, 7th, and that, and you'd be pinching yourself, wouldn't you? So yeah, you quite happily take games like Saturday, and it wasn't a bad performance, was it? From either side, it was just a bit frustrating.
No,
At times. You wanted that ball to go in the net, wasn't it? But
I
yeah,
think we performed well. Everton are a team that lack quality. We know that. And were set up very, very defensively. They were never going to win that game. They could have been playing, till the next morning, and they would not have scored a goal. The main reason being because they were so defensive. I didn't feel any threat, of conceding, but it was scoring up the other end. And maybe we should tap ourselves on the back a little bit, because Man City, Arsenal, and Chelsea, okay, yeah, we've beaten two of those teams and got beat by Chelsea. But, of course, three big clubs have all been held by Everton, and we've actually beaten them.
yeah, no, very, very, very good point. Very good point.
Yeah. Well, I'll
That
tell you what.
sorry, that kind of ties us in with bringing in our guest, I believe.
Yes, of course. Well, before we do that, one thing that we do want to ask you is to like, subscribe, and hit the bell, because it helps this channel to grow, and it is free. So please, 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 if you are watching this for the first time, do that. Even if you're an Everton fan, I've just slated your football club. I'm not slating your football club. I probably am saying what you're feeling, but even if you're an opposition fan wanting to find out a little bit more about Bournemouth, please do that. And, keep watching our videos, because we do cover every club as well. And also, before we welcome in our special guest, I'll tell you what, let's give a mention to our sponsors, Dental on the Banks. You can find them at dentalonthebanks.co.uk. And here's a little video about them now. And do keep an eye out for Anton. Welcome back to the show, Paul. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Not a problem at all. Our pleasure as always. And it's great to have you on for our half-term report. So we are at the halfway stage. We are a little bit over it. Of course, we played Everton on Saturday. However, we're going to wheel it back one game, and therefore going to cover the 19 games that we've had previously, one against every single club. So
Fair enough.
let's have a little look at our results at the halfway stage. And there they are. So some impressive wins in there, as everybody will no doubt, allude to. The Arsenal, the Man City. There's also some losses as well, which maybe people would see that could have been converted into wins or draws. But what would you say, Paul, from those results so far this season? Are A, the standout games, and B, the games where we could have probably done a little bit better, or C, where we was probably robbed?
Well, to start with the standout games, the final 3 to 8 minutes at Goodison Park was quite extraordinary, wasn't it? The first win of the season. The rest of the performance wasn't what we've been used to since. So an element of Cherries getting away with one there, but also surely securing a third straight improbable comeback of the year award from the Premier League. I mean, that really was quite extraordinary. 3-0 win at Old Trafford. Used to them now, aren't we? Nothing out of the ordinary there. But the Man City one for me was the real standout, because while it may have been diluted in some football fans' minds since because of what's happened to the champions, back then, they hadn't lost a Premier League match since, well, for many, many months. I think they'd only dropped points against Newcastle and Arsenal going back to March or something. And while they had lost in the League Cup at Spurs 3 days earlier, that was with a much changed team. This was the start of their downfall. This was proving to the rest of the football world that the 4 times champions were vulnerable and beatable. And it was an extraordinary performance. To go 2-0 up, it was, shaky, a little bit nervy right at the end with Haaland hitting the post after Iraola had pulled one back. But that was a real statement victory and well-deserved. And, I remember the second half against them last year deserved something out of that as well. So, that was really setting down a marker, I think. Spurs, I was at that game as well. Again, completely deserved that victory. I don't think there are too many, perhaps Ipswich, again, leaving it late, but this is what Andoni's Cherries do. Leaving it late, subs off the bench, they come on, score goals, go home with the win. So, I'm not going to take anything away from any of those victories. The ones where there was an element of robbery, Chelsea, 1-0, they didn't deserve 3 points that day. And who knows what a monster Evanilson might have become if he'd scored that penalty that day. What else have we got here? Brighton and Brentford were very, very close. Palace pretty much bored me to tears. West Ham, I mentioned, I think, was it off air about Enes Unal's free kick? Wow, what a moment that was. But, seeing Joel Linton score against Manchester United the other day in exactly the same way that Dango scored against Newcastle and have it ruled out, that was pretty galling. So, there are maybe a couple of missed opportunities in there, maybe a couple of points that slipped away. But, who's going to complain given the total that the Cherries are on right now?
No, most definitely. Matt, is there any others that you feel that, jump out there?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of obviously, the wins, obviously City, long overdue, wasn't it? Beating City and great performance. And like Paul said, at the time, it was kind of before their bad run, wasn't it? And before they sort of nosedived. But Man United as well has to stand out. There's nothing like going to Old Trafford and giving them a good hiding, is there? So, But in terms of, the draws and that, it could have possibly been wins. Newcastle definitely, I think, on the day, we should have won that. And obviously we were robbed. But West Ham, for me, does stand out that, we should have probably won that one, really. But and the away defeat to Leicester, I thought that we were doing everything, but we just couldn't put the ball in the net that day, could we? So there's a few there, but definitely wouldn't complain now, would we? That starting at the season, knowing where we would be this time after Christmas, we wouldn't obviously complain about anything, would we really? But if you're going to be critical, probably say West Ham for me, Leicester away, the Newcastle game. I think we could have got a few more points out of those ones.
Leicester's the one Andoni always refers back to because, they had 21 shots or whatever that game and weren't able to get past completely dominated possession and everything. And that one, that clearly irritated him. And he felt at the time it sort of, if you drop points in that game, it sort of rules out the one of the good wins against one of the big teams. But since then, I'm sure he's very happy with the overall points total. But he still mentions Leicester today.
And of course, there is the Arsenal game in there as well. The 2-0 at home to them, which, Paul, it really, really frustrated me hearing a lot of the Arsenal fans after this match saying it was due to the Saliba red card, where we were the better side for 30 minutes before that even happened.
No, very true. And they were complaining that it wasn't a red card. I couldn't understand that logic either. They, to play against Arsenal with 10 men, 60 minutes like that, of course, again, it's a sort of a dilution of the achievement, if you like, but it shouldn't be, because it was a tremendous 90-minute performance, like you say. Thoroughly deserved red card. No arguments there. And again, it was one of those, I'm not sure if we really doubted it before, but perhaps the 3-0 against Liverpool showed that there is at times a gulf still.
Yeah.
But ultimately, to beat Arsenal, who again were in a tremendous run, then they've had a minor wobble recently, but they were absolutely tremendous back then. They're tremendous again now, and any win against a big club like that should be celebrated, and perhaps shouldn't be a surprise anymore. I made a joke about going to Old Trafford and winning because it happens. It's happened a couple of times now, but these are moments and matches and weeks to really relish and grab hold of and enjoy. Take every ounce of enjoyment you can, and don't let any silly Arsenal fans try and take any enjoyment away from it, because it was a thoroughly deserved 3 points and a tremendous performance, and a sign of what was to come as well, because after that, City, Tottenham, many other big clubs fell at the hands of the Cherries.
And of course, Paul, there is one team on there as well. It's good to see them back in the Premier League, but it's only going to be for one season, isn't it? And really, I think we took our foot off the gas after what was a fantastic first half.
Yeah, so whereas the Arsenal game, I was keen to just focus on how good Bournemouth were.
Yeah.
The first half, the team selection from Southampton was a real head scratcher. Maxwell Cornet, Tyler Dibbling up front. It was very peculiar. The way they switched off at a free kick, wonderful finish by Evanilson, wonderful quick thinking by Tav as well. But it was a bit of a gift, that first 45 minutes. And yeah, quite right. Well done, Cherries, again, for taking full advantage. But yeah, that was another sign of things to come for Southampton, because they were dreadful in that first half, and in spells they've improved, but not by much. And 6 points at the halfway stage is pretty disastrous.
I'm going to ask you a quick question, and of course, it's not a Southampton blog, this, so we'll only cover it very quickly. But are they going to beat Derby County's record? Controversial.
I fear they're not, because there were signs. I was at the Palace game. I was at the Fulham game. They got a point at Craven Cottage. They took the lead at Selhurst, and there were signs that under the new manager they weren't going to shoot themselves in the foot quite as often as they had done under Russell Martin, the way they were playing out from the back and gifting goals. But then Brentford, 5-0 at home, when things had seemed to be on the up, I really do fear that they could be in for a new record, yeah.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Southampton fans. Moving swiftly on then. So this is our top scorers so far in the league. And of course, Justin Kluivert is already on 6 goals. Of course, part of that is that fantastic hat-trick against Wolverhampton Wanderers up at Molineux. Semenyo with 5, Evanilson with 5, and then, as you can see, the rest of them on there. So, Paul, I wanted to touch upon Justin Kluivert. So, firstly, he has scored more goals than Patrick in the Premier League, which is a fantastic stat considering he is still so young. But he's becoming an all-round player, isn't he? And how impressed have you been with what he's done in front of goal in particular?
Yeah, very, very impressed, especially, well, both sides of his game, really, with and without the ball. He's so important starting the press and putting pressure on opponents and nicking the ball back or helping colleagues, teammates nick the ball back. And then, the composure, the calmness, particularly from the penalty spot, taking 3 penalties in one game and creating Premier League history the way he did at Molineux, that was extraordinary. Never been done before. And you got to ask questions of Jose Sarr because he kept doing the same thing, bringing Evanilson down. But put yourself in that position. Do you go the same way each time? He took 3 completely different penalties and didn't seem shaken or nervous or unconvinced at any moment in that. So it was very, very impressive. And all round, he's sort of grown into his role as the Cherries number 10. He started sort of playing either side, and he still can play either side. At previous clubs, he was purely a winger, really, very occasionally a second striker, but never really through the middle. But that's where Andoni has decided that's where he needs him. That's where he's most prolific and proficient and valuable. And I think he's made that position his own. Bournemouth do have other players who can play there, and he can go out wide, but I think he's a terrific number 10, and I think those numbers are only going to go up and up and up.
I'm going to skip a couple of players because down to number 4 there, which is Dongo Watara. And I want to get your thoughts because, Matt, we've been talking about Dongo and we absolutely love him. We absolutely love him. I know that there is some people in the fan base that are frustrated by him, but he is one of those players that is so effective off the bench. What have you made of his contribution?
Well, they're worth their weight in gold, aren't they? Super subs. And he's unlucky that he's only got 3 goals, because I've never seen someone hit the woodwork and have goals overturned the way he has from his position. I think you can't fault his energy, his work rate. He gives absolutely everything, whether he's starting or whether he's coming off the bench. He, of course, would much rather be starting games and contributing for longer. But it's another one of Andoni's little miracles in that he has. I asked him this the other day in a press conference, that the suggestion that sort of telling a player you're not in the starting lineup, but I really think you could thrive in the final 20-30 minutes when the opposition are tired. You come on, you make hay in that final few times. That used to be a sort of a managerial cliche, a way of letting a player down, saying, you're not in my starting lineup, son, really sorry, but arm around the shoulder, it's not all bad, I've got a plan for you. And players would see through it. Not at Bournemouth. It is really a huge part of the plan that subs are crucial, and it's shown this year with all the goals that are coming in the final 20 minutes off the bench. David Brooks, most recently this weekend. I know we're only talking about the first 19, but there we go. It's happening so often, and these players really do, not just Dongo, all of them, if they're on the bench, they're not sulking. They think, right, I've got a genuine part to play in this game because I'm very likely to come on. I'm going to get chances playing in this team, the way the team plays, and I've got to take them. And I think Dongo is raw, definitely, but he's only going to get better. He is giving absolutely everything, and he's a huge asset to the team.
Yeah, definitely. I just love how he comes off the bench and gives us something different. And he's like you say, I do agree. He's a bit raw, isn't he? But like you say, he will only get better. But I think from selfish point of view, if I was a manager, I think he'd just be ideal for me as a super sub. I think he's a fantastic player. Fantastic.
And I did want to touch upon Brooksy there because you did mention him very briefly, Paul. But of course, he's been through so much and overcome Hodgkin lymphoma, which is a terrible disease. However, he is now, personally, for me, back to his very best. Do you feel that as well? And do you feel that he can really kick on and in the second part of the season become a big part of this squad?
I very much hope so, and I am quite optimistic about that. Yeah, because last year I thought Andoni doesn't fancy him. He's gone off to Southampton on loan. I think, in fairness, that was a move that he sort of pushed for because he wanted game time. And how much was he going to get at Bournemouth last year? There would have been opportunities, but not so many. And then the way he started this season, he was very much sort of fifth choice. Although Andoni always changes both wingers during the game because he asks them to work so hard, charging up and down the pitch, closing down the opposition, creating and finishing chances. Brooksy was still a fair way down the pecking order. Now, because of injuries and because of the way things have gone this season, he has got those opportunities and he's grasped pretty much each one. And I do think Andoni is a manager. He's got the managerial side, but he's clearly a very astute, very clever, wonderful coach who improves players and players like working for him and doing what he demands of them to improve their game. And he is thriving. He is definitely benefiting from this. And I think we're going to see him be more and more influential as the season goes on, like you say. And I think, the 2 goals so far, those numbers are going to rise as well because, the finish at the weekend was tremendous. He's got a lovely left foot on him. He can score a lot of different goals. And again, he's one of those players that defenders aren't going to enjoy seeing him lining up against them, whether it's from the start or especially, again, coming off the bench late on. No, you don't want to be up against that. I think I think there are very, very good signs that perhaps even the best is yet to come. You said that he's getting back to his best. I think, he's going to push through that ceiling and he's going to get even better. He should have been the best player in the Championship by miles last year at Southampton, but there was still cobwebs to shake off and so on. And yeah, I think I'm very excited. Remember his first proper season at Bournemouth, the numbers he was posting then. And again, he had an awful lot of work to do in his game. He's still young. He's got a lot of potential, a lot of talent. And very excited about what's to come with him.
Yeah, most definitely. And fingers crossed, he will only go back from strength to strength to back to where he was, back when he first joined the football club. But I tell you what, let's have a little look at some statistics here as well that we found. And this is surprising, actually, because I expected Everton to be at the top of this, but we're actually at the top of the long balls. And this is long balls being played out from the defence forwards. Are you surprised by this, Paul?
Yeah, it's not what you'd expect, but also I think the term long ball has such negative connotations from, I'm only 24, obviously, but I remember, your Wimbledons and so on, hoofing it and just very hopeful long balls. Now, there have been times when Evanilson has been asked to do a job and been second best against a giant centre back, and has not looked like touching the ball for periods in games. But then there are also lots of clever long balls and direct, sort of more looking to just go back to front quickly and then pouring forward in numbers, getting lots of players to attack the opposition and put pressure on. If they're going to pick up the first ball, can we nick it away from them? Can we force a mistake with the second ball? That sort of thing. So, Andoni is clearly not a hoof it merchant. However, he does like that tactic of and I think, particularly Senesi has got quite a good range and a good vision and can be quite accurate passing long from the back. So yeah, it's a funny one because it does make you think of Everton, who are just looking to get the ball in the opposition half and, let's just get it away from danger. Bournemouth aren't doing it for that reason. So yeah, I surprised, but certainly not concerned or embarrassed or anything like that.
Yeah, No, most definitely. And actually, this proves a bit of a point that I did make a little while back, Paul, because when Andoni Iraola first joined the football club, of course, we had that bad run of form and we was passing it around the back and we was controlling the game, but we was making those mistakes. I think, around about that Burnley game, we went a little bit more direct. And this kind of hints at that more directness, that more, it's not long ball, but more progressive play will get up the pitch a lot quicker than we did in his early games and what he did, out of Vallecano. Do you think that's a fair judgment to make?
Yeah, could well be. And you can't get more direct and wonderful long ball than Phil Billing in that Burnley game, wasn't it? That
Yeah,
game when he scored from like 40, 45 yards or something. So, no, I mean, look, I think it's another area as well where Andoni's clearly not a one-trick pony. He's not someone who's got plan A and if plan A doesn't work, just do it better and all that nonsense. He tries lots of different things and he's very clever in his approach. And yeah, if the back four were just and the back five were just hoofing it up willy-nilly every time the ball was in the Bournemouth half, then you wouldn't be enjoying the success that you are now. This is one aspect of a much bigger, more intricate game plan where Bournemouth are brilliant at causing other teams problems. And yeah, it's the way, if there is a long direct ball, the way they can swarm around to put the pressure on and nick possession back. I think it's very clever and yeah, a world away from the long ball of the 80s and so on.
yeah, definitely. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read through a little bit as well, which is from 442 and the crazy stat that shows high flying Bournemouth should be even better. So here we go. Bournemouth's analysts won't need to scratch much of the surface of the team's underlying performance data before locating a curious inconsistency that suggests they could be doing even better. Iraola's transition-based game relies on pace out wide and energy in midfield, and it's yielding goals aplenty for Bournemouth this season. They've scored 29 times in their first 19 Premier League games, combined with a lower number of goals against than everyone but the top five. That's enough to put them in the chase for a European place they've never had before. Bournemouth's rise hasn't been achieved without significant investment or bumps in the road, but the question the Cherries analysts team will be asking now isn't how they've got there, it's how the Premier League's worst performance against expected goals come about, what it means, and what the second half of the season looks like if it changes. Bournemouth have racked up the third highest XG in the division. According to FBref data, they would have been expected to score 37.4 goals in their first 19 games of the season. They're short of that by 8.7 goals, or nearly half a goal per game. Crystal Palace are the closest at 7.1 under expected, including penalties, and Bournemouth are 8.4 goals lower than expected. The quickest interpretation of this information is that Bournemouth are making significant chances of high enough quality to make up for the fact that they're not taking them at the rate they should be. Only Manchester City have taken more shots than Bournemouth this season, but the Cherries are in the bottom five for goals per shot on target, as well as the bottom seven for the percentage of their shots that hit the target. If we assume the numbers will converge to some degree, that Bournemouth are neither master chance creators nor excessively prolific finishers, both of which are possible but don't appear to be true right now, it will happen in one of two ways. Either their XG per 90 minutes will drop, in which case their performance against it goals minus XG will level off, or their fortunes in front of goal will improve, and they will score more of the high quality chances they make. A reduction in XG doesn't bear thinking about if poor finishing proves to be a persistent problem, but optimists among the Vitality Stadium staff will fancy the ability of Justin Kluivert, Evanilson, Anton Semenyo, and Dango Ouattara to fire the Cherries into Europe for the first time. And we do have some statistics as well, and we'll be able to see those. There we are. That's our shots. Second only to Manchester City, with an XG rating of 34.59. But, of course, in the bottom five, in terms of, the difference between the XG and those goals that have come to fruition. So, Paul, I'm not a big one on XG, to be honest. I'm not somebody that really studies it in much detail. But what do you make of those stats?
Well, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it, to this point,
Yeah.
to have such an attacking, wonderfully creative Bournemouth team that are creating such wonderful chances in every game. I don't think so. Those two scenarios put there, the one that either suddenly chances will start go flying in, and then the gap will close. The other one that the XG, the number of chances created, will drop. I'm not convinced that it's going to be either of those. I can see this carrying on. That Bournemouth are still a club that can't afford the stellar names, and won't be for many years, of course. But they've got very, very good players who are improving all the time under Andoni Iraola's coaching, and players at this level are going to need more chances to score than at City and Arsenal and the very top clubs, because otherwise they would cost gazillions of pounds. So I think Bournemouth are always going to need to create more chances. It would be absolutely wonderful if they went on a run of finishing all of their chances, or I don't think they ever want to. They'll certainly not want that number of chances created to drop. And yes, everyone wants to finish more chances than they do, but I think there's always going to be that gap. It is astonishing that they are so high up on that table, that they are creating so many chances in that game. Matt mentioned the Leicester game, which was the biggest example of needing to be more ruthless and clinical in front of goal. But the big elephant in the room at the moment, which I know we're going to talk about later, is who's going to be in the team to get on the end of chances, because injuries have been mounting for a few weeks now and have got worse this week. So I think we're still going to, for the next few weeks and months, we're going to see lots of chances that aren't taken. Hopefully we see enough chances are being taken to continue this wonderful rise up the table. But it does make me chuckle a little bit when there's the odd sign of impatience over, should Europe be this season, when there's sudden talk in the national press of Bournemouth are genuine contenders for Europe. It's such an enormous leap. Now, the one thing in the Cherries' favour is that, depending how the fortunes of the other Premier League clubs in Europe go this season, there could be 9 European spots up for grabs this season, and then happy days. There's a real chance of grabbing one of those. But blimey, it's been such a journey just over the last 2.5 years, 2 years. So let's. As I do understand a little bit of the impatience and the excitement and optimism and great hope that something extraordinary could happen next year with Bournemouth on the continent playing some big clubs in European competitions. I also think, come on, let's just enjoy what's going on at the minute, because it's absolutely fantastic. And the more carried away you get, the more disappointed you are when those expectations aren't met. But I think I mentioned it to you before. Bill Foley, the owner, has a wonderful phrase: set unrealistic expectations and then exceed them. So he's talked quite openly about wanting and expecting to be in Europe in 4 or 5 years. I wouldn't be surprised if he suddenly finds a few quid to spend in this transfer window and help pushing in the right direction. But we'll see.
I was always of the view that it was going to be a brick by brick scenario, 10th this season. But I think Bill and Andoni Iraola have got different thought process. And I think, in the past couple of games, and, Matt, I'll throw this one to you. I think that, we have taken our chances. A lot of these stats and this XG is probably going to jump back to that Chelsea game, that Leicester game, probably earlier on in the season, against Southampton. Maybe it could be seen that we could have had a couple more. And actually, when we look at the recent form, that is probably going to be a little bit more in line with where we are, rather than being a little bit more wasteful at the start of the season. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you probably got a point. Like I say, that I don't really look into the XG and all that sort of stuff too much in detail like yourself. But yeah, I would probably say you're probably right. I would say that we are probably a lot more, clinical than we were, possibly earlier on in the season. But it does, it's gonna be difficult going forward, isn't it? Obviously, losing 2 strikers this week, which we'll touch on shortly. It does make you wonder, doesn't it? How these stats will continue to look. But yeah, I mean, it's something I don't massively look into too much. But yeah, definitely, I would agree with probably, some of the worst of this is probably from games like the Leicester, that's added to these stats throughout the season, definitely.
Well, let's find out a little bit more about what Glenn Murray said on BBC Sport. Of course, he is a pundit on Football Focus, where you can see him on most weeks, isn't he, on there now?
Yeah.
He said the second most shots in the Premier League, and that just shows what a great job Iraola has done. Third best expected goals. I personally think this is the best squad Bournemouth have ever had. Do you agree, Paul? Is this better than? Of course, Eddie is an absolute legend. Nobody can take anything away from Eddie. But do you think that this is the best squad we've ever had?
I don't see how that can be debated, really. Bournemouth have never been anywhere close to a world where you can spend £40 million on one player before. Eddie was swimming in very different waters, shopping in very different stores. And yeah, I'm an enormous fan of Eddie. I started dealing with him when I was at ITV, and he was a player, and followed his journey through and spent many a happy time watching his Bournemouth team climbing the divisions and bloodying the noses of big teams in the Premier League. But this squad is a world away from the squads that he had, because even when he finished, he led the team to ninth. There were some tremendous players in there, but players who'd come up from League One. And, while a lot of this team has been in the Championship and lower down, it's also got players like Evanilson, Justin Kluivert, Dean Howson. Jose Mourinho described him when he was they were at Roma together as one of he was going to be a great footballer, one of the best players in Europe at his age group. Eddie wasn't dealing with players like that. So, I don't think Glenn's gone out on a limb there, really. It's absolutely true. But what he says about, all of those shots, it's not easy to create chances in the Premier League by a long stretch. It's very, very difficult to even get the ball off many of these teams. And so he's absolutely right when he says this is one stat that really does highlight what a wonderful job the magician is doing, because Iraola is a wizard. I find it astonishing every single week what he's the rabbits he's pulling out of hats are just fantastic. And it's, and it's so consistent. It's consistently good. You can every team can pull off a good result every now and then, a surprise every now and then. Ipswich looked like they were going straight back down, similar-ish points total to Southampton. Then they go and turn over Chelsea. You can do it every now and then. Bournemouth are doing it consistently, and the graph is just an upward trajectory. I mean, every time you think, well, this is it, this is the ceiling, push through it again. So for me, progress this year has always just got to be breaking last season's points total, which was a record at the club in the top division. Do that again, and Bournemouth need less than a point a game, I think, to break that points record again this season. So whatever happens from here to then, go past that, get 50 plus points for the first time ever. That is a huge success for me.
Well, I tell you what, let's have a look at the two injuries that we have been discussing. And a problem point as well for the club now is, of course, Evanilson was declared out on Monday. And it was only today that Enes Unal has unfortunately fell foul to an ACL. Jefferson has been recalled from his loan at Watford. But this is, how do you think we're going to cope with this, Paul? Because we're in that period between Solanke leaving and Evanilson joining. We had Semenyo up front, and I think Semenyo can do that role. However, the problem is you're then taking him away from what he's been doing so well. Do you think that Jefferson can make the step up? Of course, he's not had a great time at Watford.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is down to Watford and the other players that they have there, and there might have been, because I think they spent a lot of money on another striker, and there was probably an appetite to play him rather than Jefferson, who was only there on loan. He only had 3 starts, I think, at Watford this season in the Championship. So,
Yeah.
It's hard to judge really how that loan spell has been. What I can tell you is that Andoni Iraola clearly likes him because he sanctioned the deal. No players are signed while it's the recruiting department that identifies the players and ultimately, the owner who signs them. The manager's got to have a big say. And he said only recently that when he is sort of presented with options, and he will look at the analysis that he's presented with, and he says there are times when you see things and you think, well, he's missing that, and that can't be coached, and I need that element in that player who plays in that position. So he will say no to that player, but then when another player is presented and he likes what he sees, and he might see, right, that's a diamond that needs a bit of polish, let's go for it. So he's seen something in Daniel Jefferson. I'm such a big fan of Andoni's that I would have faith of him getting a tune out of me if he was that desperate and stuck me up front with the other 10 players around. Then he will. 33 points. There's no relegation worries here anymore. Like I said, you need less than a point a game to break last season's points record. It's a real shame for Evanilson, obviously, that he's presumably going to be out for at least 6 weeks with a broken bone in his foot. It's an enormous shame for Enes Unal. I really can't believe the luck of that fella to do his ACL again when it looked like he was in for a run of games. And after the wonderful moment he gave us earlier in the season against West Ham with that free kick, scored against Ipswich, crucial goal there as well. And he's a player that, again, Andoni really rates and likes. His teams had faced him in La Liga, so again, he was someone he had a real input in over his signing, and he's not had a run of games yet. He's been very, very unlucky with injuries. It looked like this was going to be his chance, and it isn't. So I presume Jefferson comes in for the FA Cup game this weekend, when Andoni's plans might have been tweaked a little bit. Perhaps he's going to look at that game and think, right, I need to look at options. Justin Kluivert can play as a false nine. Antoine Semenyo, like you say, he can go up top as well. There are lots of elements to this that need juggling, and there's no obvious right way now. Mentioned earlier that I wouldn't be surprised now, as difficult as it is to find a decent number 9 in any transfer window. It's hardest in January because teams really don't want to lose them. I wouldn't be surprised to see one through the door, especially because before Unal's injury, there was a lot of chatter that there were teams, particularly on the continent in Spain again, that were looking to take him on loan or a permanent deal. So I've got no knowledge of whether there was any genuine interest, whether Bournemouth were tempted by it, but there were a lot of rumours, and perhaps that's because Bournemouth have already got someone lined up. It's a pickle because it's a tough fixture list that's coming up imminently. The incredible rise is surely, this is a big bump in the road to lose both centre forwards. Maybe Daniel Jebbison can come back with real motivation to prove Watford wrong and go flying. Who knows? I very much hope so.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed Daniel does hit the ground running, and no doubt we will see him on Saturday against West Brom. But let's have a look at the treatment room, because it's a bit, it's a bit concerning. Matt, what do you make of all the injuries that we've had? Is it part and parcel of the pond that we are now swimming in, that when you are fighting to get into Europe at the top end of the table, you are going to pick up these injuries?
Yeah, I mean, it's part and parcel of the game as well, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
The thing is what strikes me most about when you look at these players, and you just think if these will all fit now, I mean, what a great selection dilemma the manager will have. I mean, obviously, Marcus Senesi, I mean, as you well know, he's one of my favourites, but Dean Housen's come in and performed so well. It's a case of like, how do you fit everybody in? You've got 2 right backs there, that are competing week in, week out. And, I just think if all these players were, fit now, Scott, you look at the midfield, Christie, absolute blinder, Cook as well, and then you've got Tyler Adams. So, it does make me wonder, maybe if we had every player fit, maybe that might have helped with, you never know, might have been further up the table. But yeah, I think in terms of the injuries, a lot of it is just part and parcel of the game now, isn't it? I mean, look at, he was injured during training, wasn't he? And I know they say players play a lot of games these days, but obviously, that's more like the European clubs, isn't it? With all those different, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday games and that. So I don't think it's down to the amount of games we're playing, but I think it's just unfortunate that, we've picked up so many as we had throughout the season. Sinisterra, I thought he looked on fire during the pre-season.
Yeah, he was.
Looked really, really good. And unfortunately for him, I think he's only made about 8 appearances this year, I think, maybe, on and off the bench and that. So just think if all these players were fit, what kind of selection headache Iraola would have.
Well, definitely. And I tell you what, let's have a look at, the men that are going to be having to make these decisions, of course, with regards to injuries. And Paul, I'll throw this at you. What do we do? Do we buy players in, young talents, like we have done recently, and all throughout Andoni Iraola's time, let's be honest, all throughout Bill Foley's time, and even back to Eddie Howe's? Or do we go for some loans, some experienced heads who maybe can just get us across the line? I saw one suggestion out there that was bounding around, and that was bring back Callum Wilson. Of course, somebody who is injury prone, but somebody who might be able to just get us across that line. What way do you think we have to go?
So Callum Wilson, Evan Ferguson's another one that's been mentioned as well. I don't see why Newcastle would let Callum Wilson go. You know, Sod's Law says that they let him go, and then Isak gets injured the next day, and then they're in the position that Bournemouth are now with both number 9s out. So, yeah, I'd be very surprised if they let that happen. Evan Ferguson, why would Brighton let him go to a rival for Europe? You know, he's been linked with Fulham as well. Same reason. Why would they let him go there? It's very difficult finding anyone in January who other clubs are willing to let go, who is going to strengthen your team. I think the young players is clearly the way. It's the only way Bournemouth can go, really. You can't go up competing with the big clubs with the huge fees, simply because the rules won't allow it anymore. You know, I think the only reason we've seen the number of incomings this season so far is because Dom Solanke went to Spurs for so much money, and that is unfortunately going to have to be the model until there's a new stadium and everything else, and a huge upturn in commercial revenue and everything. There's always going to have to be a major sale if there are going to be significant incomings. I think I have absolute full faith in those 4 people on screen there. I think they work wonderfully, and especially work wonderfully together. You know, there's clearly great trust, brilliant relationships behind the scenes there with the way things are knitted together, and holes are plugged and problems are solved. One area which has been amazing until this week is how bit of luck that everything's gone well at left back after Lloyd Kelly left, and Milos Kerkez is the only one really who can play there. So again, going back to sort of Bournemouth's position in the food chain, it's never going to be a squad that has too much talent, too many players at the manager's disposal. There's always going to be that risk that a couple of injuries can really derail things. But this again goes back to Glenn Murray's point of it being the best squad the club have ever had. You know, anything like that number of injuries when Eddie was in charge, and there's every chance the wheels would have come off, because there was nothing like the squad depth that there is now. So things are going in the right direction. Fingers crossed some of those players that we just had up on screen will be back sooner rather than later. Luis Sinisterra, I think, played up front on the opening day against Forest, didn't he? So maybe he'll be back shortly. Him, Marcus Tavernier. There's a couple of these longer term injury sufferers are back on the grass training on their own. Will hopefully be back training with the rest of the squad in the next week or two, and we'll see them back in the first team. Who knows? End of the month, middle of next month. But you know, at time to really help push on and push up the table still.
Do you both feel that, you know, if we are to do any business during this window, it will have to come from the continent or even further afield?
Yeah, I would say quite possibly. Yeah, I mean, like Paul was saying, why would Brighton sell one of their strikers to a European rival? Look at last January window. It's when we brought in, wasn't it, on loan?
Yeah.
And there might be a deal out there on the continent where they may look and bring a player on loan, and maybe with a potential to make the move permanent, possibly. It's always a tricky window there, the January one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the 2 arrivals this week have come from the MLS and South America, and clearly, again, sort of another huge leap forward is clearly the scouting network that Bournemouth have, that they have got eyes everywhere, but they're not afraid of looking closer to home as well, and raiding especially Bristol City many times over.
Yes.
So they if there are players out there that they think can fit the bill, they'll find them and bring them in. It's a very attractive proposition coming to Bournemouth these days. The training ground is about to open in a month or 6 weeks. You've got the stadium on the horizon. Very ambitious owner, talking of Europe, 7th in the Premier League, lots of points, a very exciting manager to work for. And a wonderful place to live. So lots and lots of reasons to join Bournemouth, to get, for very talented players to get onto their agents, say, come on, sort that out, will you?
And of course, these two youngsters, Akimboni was given his debut by Wayne Rooney when he was at DC United, and Julio Sola, a highly rated Argentine left back from Lanús. And what I want to do is just quickly, before we look at the table, just throw this at you, Paul, because this signing, I think is great. It's a typical Bournemouth signing. It's the sort of signing I want to see us make. However, deep down, it does feel like to me that Sola has been bought in as a potential replacement because they know that it's going to be so difficult to keep hold of Milos Kerkez. Can we keep hold of Kerkez during this window? And the likes of Howson and Zabania, who have also been linked. I know Zabania was linked with Man City and Real Madrid. Howson's been linked with Real Madrid. Can we keep hold of all these defenders?
In January, yes, I'd be astonished if any one of them left in January. I don't think that's part of the plan at all. I think in the summer it's a very different story. I think I said earlier, I think this has to be part of the planning, part of the model now. Look down the coast at Brighton; they do it fantastically well. They find these players for, obviously they're still fortunes, but in football terms, for not quite peanuts, but for very affordable prices, to replace players that they're selling for ridiculous prices. Carlos Baleba, there's talk down at Brighton that he will break their own transfer record of 100 odd million for Moises Caicedo, and they've only had him for a couple of years, but they've constantly got these players coming in. And I think, Ilya Zabani, who I think he's a fantastic example as well. Whenever you look at any of these young players, he came in, I think he was a teenager when he arrived. His first 6 months, he barely kicked a ball, and no one could have predicted where he is now. The season he had last year was fantastic. He's kicked on again this year. And of course, big clubs are going to be sniffing around. Milos Kerkez had a decent year last year, but he's kicked on again. He's been tremendous, both defensively, but especially in attack, coming up with goals and assists now as well. Dean Howson, there are going to be clubs looking at him and thinking, how have we missed out on him already? So, I think the recruitment at Bournemouth has been stellar, and I think it's only going to get better. I think it's very well run, that department. I think it's very shrewd and clever what they're doing. And I think I wouldn't be so concerned about what signings mean for current players at the moment. I don't think Bournemouth will see great value in accepting offers and doing deals to lose players in January. There's no great value in or benefit in that. In the summer, though, accepting a big offer means they can go and do more exciting things.
Yeah, definitely. And personally, for me, Matt, you probably agree with me. Milos Kerkez is the best left back in this division, and that's saying a lot.
Yeah. Well, I think we would say that being biased, wouldn't we? But,
yeah, we would. Yeah, we are.
Yeah, like Paul said, though, his performances are always 110% up and down that pitch, defensively sound, great in attack, and you can see why his name's being linked with the clubs it has been. But with this new lad that we've just signed, I believe he's an Argentinian under-20 international.
He is, yeah.
I had a quick look on YouTube at some footage of him, and he's got some grit about him as well. So I'm looking very forward to seeing him get an opportunity to play. I'm not too sure whether he'll play in the Cup at the weekend. Maybe it might be too soon, or not too sure. But I'd love to see him this weekend play, because you give obviously Kerkez a bit of a rest, and we get to see the new man. Because what I've seen on on YouTube, he looks like he's going to be a real asset. So, yeah, like Paul says, club's recruitment is excellent, isn't it? And long may it continue.
Yeah, I love a highlight reel, don't you? Absolutely love a highlight reel. It's just brilliant when you see these players come in and you're seeing all the skills that they pull off. But I tell you what, let's have a little look at the table as it stands at the moment. And of course, you've added in there the Everton game there as well, Matt. Could have done it after the Man United game when we were fifth, but
Yeah,
that's remarkable, isn't it? It really is remarkable.
dizzy heights. Yeah, yeah, I mean, I still pinch myself when I look at it, to be honest. You know, it's great to see us, you know, so high up the table. But yeah, I mean, I predicted at the beginning of the season 10th. I thought if we finish 10th, then again it's progression on from last season. But yeah, no, I'm quite confident that we might finish sort of between 7th, maybe 8th, 9th, maybe, if we keep going the way we are. But that's me with my dreaming head on, obviously. That's me in my European dreamland. But no, I mean, whatever happens, I mean, it's been a great, you know, first half of the season, and let's see if we can kick on and achieve that European dream.
Definitely. And sandwiched in between Man City and Aston Villa, two teams in the Champions League. It doesn't get better than that. You know, years ago, Matt, let's be fair, -17, we would have been happy to be sandwiched. Well, we would have been pinching ourselves if we were sandwiched in between Everton and Wolves. But yeah, there we are. Paul, can we do it? Will we do it?
It's still an enormous ask. It would be an enormous ask with Evanilson and Enes Unal in the squad. So it's one of them where, why get carried away? Why not just enjoy West Brom at the weekend and then, you know, see what can happen at Chelsea, at Newcastle, at home against Forest and Liverpool. That's, you know, that's a daunting run of fixtures that are coming up in the next 3-4 weeks. But nothing to be afraid of, only stuff to get excited about. But looking too far ahead, I think you run the risk of being overly disappointed then if it doesn't happen. And ultimately, finishing mid-table in the Premier League, you mentioned it. You only have to have you don't have to go back very far to the recent past to think this is dreamland for Bournemouth. And that doesn't mean don't belong in the top 7. Absolutely. There was a question was asked 3 or 4 times in a press conference the other day. You know, does the table lie? Do you deserve to be 6th or 7th, what they are at the time? They absolutely deserve to be 7th in the table, the way Andoni has them playing. And, you know, you mentioned pinch me moments. There's a player on the screen there that we haven't mentioned. Kepa, the world's most expensive goalkeeper, plays for Bournemouth. I find this utterly extraordinary and exhilarating. I love going to the Vitality. I go there for matches 2 or 3 times a month, and I'm there for interviews and press conferences most weeks. And it is an absolute delight. It is wonderful what is happening at that football club. And I desperately hope it continues for a long time. You mentioned about players leaving. That's my one sort of, if I'm going to break my own rule and look too far in the future, I do worry what might happen when another big club comes in for Andoni, or maybe it'll be, you know, Bilbao, the club of his heart. Maybe they'll come back for him, whatever. But, you know, again, why worry about that today? Just enjoy what's happening and have faith in the club, who, you know, there seem to be such sensible, level-headed, clever grown-ups running that club who will have plans and will continue to pull off extraordinary moves in the transfer market, in the managerial market, whatever it is. And, you know, with the training ground and promise of a stadium to come, the future looks extraordinarily bright, doesn't it?
It does. And I'll tell you what, let's just very quickly touch upon West Brom coming up at the weekend, of course. Is there an argument, though, that we say right, okay, let's focus on getting this silverware. What do you reckon, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, look where we are in the league, and it's like Paul said earlier. We're not part of a relegation battle, and I think the furthest we've only ever got in the cup is like the quarter final. I think we've done that twice. I think it's 1950.
Something, wasn't it? 4,
1950
5, something like that, wasn't it?
1957 seems to ring a
7.
bell. I might be wrong. And 2021, wasn't it? When we
Yes.
played
Yep.
Saints. So yeah, why not? I mean, I think that would really take us to the next level, wouldn't it? A bit of major silverware in the cabinet, and clubs have done it before, haven't they? They've got to the cup finals. I mean, that year I think Wigan won it, didn't they? And they were, I think, fighting relegation all season, weren't they?
They went down actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't want to do what they did.
Pompey
won't.
and they were having a fairly, decent season in the league. So, why
Yeah.
can't Bournemouth? And I think I think a lot of fans might be torn between, would you rather see Bournemouth get into Europe or would you rather see a bit of silverware? And I think I've sort of edged more towards silverware, to be honest, especially with where we are in the league at the minute.
Look at Pompey, Paul. They, Pompey for years and years and years after have talked about that FA Cup win, and it stays close to them. If we did it here, it's going to be that similar sort of feeling, isn't it? Even though the FA Cup is seen as probably not the competition that it was.
No, true, and you've obviously there's an awful long way to go from the third round to lifting the trophy, and particularly when you go back to the injuries that we talked about earlier. I think this is a weekend where there's no danger of Fandoni just writing it off. Yeah, not interested. Let's play the third team. But I think it is a game where he'll probably highlight a few players who've played most, if not every minute, and think, right, first thing, you're rested. Now I'll work out how to cover you. And I think it will be a bit of a patched up team. It might well be a team that, is a sort of a little bit experimental to see how to cover for the loss of Evanilson and Enes Unal. I think I can understand, everyone in sort of our age generation looking at the FA Cup, thinking of it with stardust and magic about it and very excited. But equally, I can understand, particularly the younger generation, thinking, hang on, I quite fancy qualifying for Europe and the away days that'll bring. I don't think it has to be one or the other, particularly at this stage in early January. Just, see what team can be put out this weekend, see what result against a West Brom side that are likely to rest players as well, but so did Leicester last year. So it's a tricky one. I think it's very boring to say, take every game every week as it comes, all that sort of stuff. But again, I just think getting carried away is a bit dangerous. As I would dearly love Bournemouth to go to Wembley for a semi-final first of all, and then the final and lift the cup. That would be magical. Love them to sneak into Europe, whichever competition it would be. And at the moment, things look very, very positive, very promising. But yeah, let's add a bit of realism as well, and just be aware that there are big bumps in the road to come with the injuries that there are, and with the opposition very keen for points and wins in both competitions as well. Getting carried away is dangerous, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, before we go, we might as well do our Guess the Cherry game. And Paul, we'll let you have the first guess at this as well. So here it is. So our cherry this week was born in Southampton in 1978. He signed for Bournemouth for £5,000. That's a long, long time ago now, isn't it? Played 282 times for the Cherries, hitting the net 37 times, scored the playoff winning goal to promote Burnley to the Premier League, was caretaker manager at Bristol City before becoming manager at Cheltenham until September 2023. Who is he?
I think I do know this.
Go for
which
it.
I wasn't expecting to. I think that's Wade Elliott.
Of course it is. Of course it is. No, fantastic. And a fantastic player throughout his entire career as well. So yes, yeah, Wade. And of course it's gone into management as well now. So, fingers crossed, he can go from strength to strength.
Yeah, good luck to him. He's a good guy, Wade Elliott.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, £5,000 from Bashley, if I remember rightly.
That's right.
Bashley.
Yeah, Bashley.
Yeah.
£5,000. And I think they probably had to scrape that together as well at the time, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
So
It's a different world, isn't it now? Different world.
Yeah.
Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on again. Thank you so much for joining us on this special cherry picking. And no doubt we'll catch up probably towards the end of the season at some point.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks ever so much.
Talksport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the Talksport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search Talksport Fan Network.